This episode of Total Network Operations is sponsored by Meter, the company building better networks. Meter delivers full-stack networking infrastructure, wired, wireless, and cellular, to leading enterprises. They design the hardware and software, manage deployments, and run support, providing a single integrated solution that scales. You can go to meter.com/tnops to book a demo. That's meter.com/TNOPS. You should try it. And now, on with the show. Welcome to Total Network Operations, the project with a podcast dedicated to hardworking network operators like you who deliver all the packets and automate the packets and process the packets with AI tools. We drive conversations on great ideas in NetOps so you can make informed decisions for your network, for your team, and to really spur constructive dialogue between vendors, NetOps teams, and across the entire community. I am your friendly neighborhood network automator, Scott Robohn. I have a very special guest with us today. I'm going to embarrass him horribly. He has really been an influence on me in not just network automation and what's happening with AI for NetOps today, but how to not be afraid to take different choices and chances with your career. Like, it was a real education for me by example. So I'll let him expand on that if he wants to. But let me welcome Jeremy Schulman today. Jeremy, I'm just going to say, why don't you tell us your background, the work you've done in network automation, and how you're getting to the experiments and work that you're doing with AI for NetOps today. You take it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, Scott. It's a real privilege to be here. Scott and I go way back, like way back. I was thinking about that. It's like, it's going to be almost 20 years, like in a few years. I know, right? So, my story with automation really started in my Juniper days. And I was really lucky to be taught by the godfather of automation, Phil, right?
Say his name.
Phil Schaefer.
That's right. Yeah, still love Juniper. Yep.
Yeah. And it was an amazing, mentorship. And I think I was lucky and worked hard. I think those two things together, charted my path with, doing automation. I was really lucky and privileged to work with some really great leaders at Juniper, like Scott and Pallavi Mahajan, and others that supported my efforts there. And after spending many years at Juniper, I went out into startup land, did a startup, worked directly with customers. But eventually found myself to where I am now, where I'm at a customer. I am a customer now, right?
Yep.
And I really wanted to take all the things that I had been talking about and ideas that I had been sharing and actually put them into practice, for real, not for play. And that's brought me to where I am now. I've been at MLB for about 6 years. I'm a senior director in charge of a group of software engineers that build really sophisticated systems. And I like to think of it as pioneering the frontier between IT systems and automation. We do a lot of network automation, but not exclusively network automation. So I've gotten a really good perspective of things, beyond the network automation landscape.
Can I ask you, just tease out one thing here, if you're able? When we hear about any major league sports organization, we think about the athletes and the court or the field or the diamond, but the technology is really important for delivering the product. Can you make those connections a little clearer for folks?
Well, in the context of networking, because I'll keep it kind of relevant to that, sure. The networking is such an important asset to all of what happens, in the sports industries. I think there is a broadcast technology, much in the same way where telephony went from analog to IP telephony. Mm-hmm. There's a huge shift that's been happening in the broadcast space where it's gone from analog to what's called ST2110, which is a lot of multicast and so forth. So we've got a ton of bandwidth connections that goes out to each of our ballparks and data centers where we're using these huge pipes to not only transmit the game of baseball, the video broadcast, but the baseball operations and all the, the game data and the fan experience. And it's so it's so important to us, our connectivity that, I think of what we do as protecting the fan experience in that way. I've talked about this of, a lot of times network engineers and the networking practitioners will think of themselves as bit plumbers, in the basement of some part of their business. But at the end of the day, when your business runs on the network, you're an important player, in the whole team of things.
Yep. Very good. Thanks for that, that little sidebar. So from your, leaps forward in network automation and some of the names that you mentioned that you were able to learn from, going out and, trying some things on your own, and then moving into the data center space, take us forward toward how you put more emphasis on automation, different domains you were focusing on automation. And of course, we want to land eventually with, what you've been playing with in AI for NetOps the last 6 to 9 months.
Yeah, I mean, when I was at Apstra, which was really a data center automation product space, it was really a great experience because I got to really learn from some, incredible thinkers and doers at that company. The CTO there was a guy named Sasha who came out of Juniper. Mm-hmm. And he kind of opened my eyes to a different way of thinking about automation. Prior to Apstra, I was thinking very much along the lines of what Puppet and Chef had been doing, and I had some, experience with Puppet and Chef. But we kind of took a different point of view of how to architect, a solution stack around an application rather than a collection of building blocks and Legos that you could just, combine to do whatever. So that was kind of an important mind shift. And then going through just the startup experience of focusing all your energy into one area maniacally was quite an experience to help shape one's mind. So that was the data center experience of it. But what I had imagined and what I still imagine today is a much broader set of automation technology solutions that can be applied more broadly beyond just data center. Sure. And folks have seen me present about what I called, NetCAD at the NAF forums about kind of that idea.
So I remember in those early days, there was a real affinity for wanting to manage data center infrastructure like compute operators were managing OS versions on their equipment. And so there was this transference of, well, here's a tool that sysadmins use for their infrastructure. Why not reapply it to network infrastructure? I think Ansible falls in the same category, right? It was created for other purposes. Let's find ways to make it easier for the folks in the data center. But I think your experience at Apstra kind of took you beyond that mindset, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yeah, so that's true. But I think the real insight that I learned from the whole Puppet Chef experience was we were asked at the time when I was working at Juniper, we were asked by a really large company, to make the network accessible by the application engineers so that the application engineers, when they were going to deploy their application to production, could simply affect the network to do what was necessary without opening up a ticket or a change window with the network. So the whole idea of using Puppet and Chef was not for the network engineering people themselves. It was not an idea of let's take Puppet and make Puppet for networking so that network engineers can manage network devices with Puppet or Chef or Ansible. It started with the idea of we just want to take the network engineering bottleneck out of the production flow and give the application engineers or the DevOps people the same look and feel experience, right? And that was actually a really key insight, because what that started me thinking about was how do we reduce friction in a complex, IT process, whether that's network automation or otherwise. But it all kind of led me to think about automation as a function of friction. And you hear me talk about the aha to cha-ching and the oh crap to all clear. And really, the piece in between each of those, aha to cha-ching is the friction involved. And if you can reduce the friction while improving the overall service and quality of that service, then you're, quote, winning, and, you quote, make all the big dollars there. So
Right.
that was kind of the big aha thing there. Now people took that idea and kind of ran with it, right? We saw like, well, why don't we give network engineers Puppet or Chef? And that really didn't go anywhere. And then, I had a good friend of mine, Peter, over with Ansible, Peter Spragata, and he really made Ansible happen for networking, which I think was a great thing for the networking community writ large, because it gave them a way to bridge a very difficult part of friction, which was, I'm a network engineer, I want to automate stuff, I'm not a programmer, I don't want to program stuff.
Right.
Here's a tool that lets me do some things, in an automated way.
Sure.
Ansible wasn't meant to do all the things, but it does some things really well.
Yep.
And, to Peter's credit, he really rallied an entire industry around building, modules and componentry around Ansible, so that it became a broader tool for the networking community. And I think that was a huge success on his part.
There's one other very clear incident that I remember that's kind of adjacent to this, but you'll see where I'm going with it. I remember the day that you told me, our SVP of software, Bob Muglia, says we're going to get rid of the CLI. And feeling so threatened by that, as, I was a JNCIE, right? I was one of this class of, router jocks that got to where we are by memorizing long strings of really complex commands, maybe with the help of the question mark and the tab key occasionally. But that's a very, very clear crossroads that I think came out of me watching what you were doing. Do you remember that conversation, or at least remember the era?
Yeah, I remember, what I'll refer to the time of Muglia.
Yes. And not to tie it just to him as an individual, but that ended up being a pretty important thought, right? In terms of moving away from hand jamming, all my, show tech support commands, etc., to having a programmatic interfaces to do what we need to do and do it in an automated way.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were, maybe a little over our skis there in the sense of what we expected the industry to adopt, right?
Yeah.
I was, again, really fortunate to know a guy named John Willis, who kind of mentored me through the DevOps era. And he kind of shared with me, the expected time frame for what it would take for for an industry to make a shift from,
right.
In the case of the server admins, hand jamming bash scripts to using tools like, Puppet and Chef and Ansible. And really that was a 10-year period, right? So, when I really started in earnest, talking about these tools, which I have to believe was probably around the 2013 timeframe, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, think about that. We're a little about 10 years past that. And I think, in retrospect, looking at where we as an industry in networking are now, after those 10 years, I think we're, meeting the bar, the expectation bar that DevOps set for us. I mean, it's been 10 years. I think we've done a lot of really good accomplishments in the last 10 years. We've had some really key milestones. I think NAF is one of those key milestones. I think that what we still struggle with is having really good, I'll call it multi-purpose tooling, like the DevOps people had Puppet and Chef, and the Puppet and Chef stuff has been moved on. I mean, the whole DevOps industry has moved through its own cycles of what happened after Puppet and Chef. So, I keep saying Puppet and Chef as a reference point, but that's just a point in time. Networking, the networking industry is writ large, really still struggles with, tools, consumable tools that network engineers and practitioners can use without having to be, quote unquote, a programmer, right? We still struggle with that. I mean, there's some products on the market. And then again, looking at the idea of, can we adopt technology that was not built for networking and apply it to networking automation? We've tried to do that with, some bits of success and some amounts of failure, that I found.
Yeah. And I think we'll still be trial and error. One thing that I've really shifted my mindset on is the software development community, for lack of a better way of putting it, has many more tools and have worked through processes that can be reappropriated for managing network configurations. And it makes a lot of sense to ride along with that where you can, and then tweak where it doesn't make sense. I'm not saying drop anything networking specific. You should all be using, Git and CI/CD for everything you do with the network. But there's a lot of momentum, I think, that we can use in the network engineering community to benefit from that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of technology that people can pace themselves through. Version controlling files in general is a sane act of any engineering practice, whether it's, source code that's, a script or a configuration file,
or a script version. Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I think, what I remember hearing stories about was somebody would write a script and they would, in the file name, have version 1 and another file name called version 2, another file name for version 2, but I backed this thing out. And, I'm like, have you met my friend Git?
Right. Right.
Exactly. And look, that's a new tool. That's a new way of thinking about things. I think by and large, I think we might be over that kind of knowledge hump as a networking, industry. I think I would like to believe that.
I think there's still progress to be made. I like, we've made some progress. There are still miles to go before we sleep. I think, without focusing on, is it a software engineering practice? I think that there's just discipline, right? Sure.
A disciplinary practice. Like one of the first things that I approach, a project with, somebody comes to me and says, I've got this great idea. We need to do this automation thing. Right. I'm like, all right, show me the process that you currently follow manually. And they're like, well, we haven't really written it down. We can talk to you. I'm like, no, we're not doing that. You're going to write it down, right? And we're going to go through that process. And I actually make people, write a document in the style of, user stories and personas and use cases and things like that. I mean, I teach them at least that practice, so I guide them through a documentation effort. And at the end of that, we have a really well done, plan, or somebody might call that a requirements document, but I don't, I just call that a plan. But it allows, somebody who's like, okay, I know comprehensively what you mean by I want to automate this thing or that thing, or I want the behavior of this or that. But that's a discipline. Like, most people may not apply that discipline because they just kind of want to rush to the fun bits of hacking out code without really thinking through, what it is that they're trying to accomplish and what are some of the caveats, constraints, and gotchas that might come up.
So the groundwork of understanding workflows as is today and what they might look like, in your not a requirements document, that thought needs to be put down first, the discipline, as you're calling it. So
yeah, absolutely. I think there's a practice even there, that, I think like as a, if one was a consultant and went into a shop and the shop said, and the customer said, well, we want to automate like 80% of what we do. And you said, okay, well, show me what you're doing that you want to automate. And if the first step is, well, we need to document that, gosh, that could take like months, It
could.
I mean, because without that, you can't like say, well, how long it's going to take, what tools I should use, what technology I should approach. Can I buy things, off the shelf that I can commercially get you done in a week? Or do I have to write artisanally handcrafted code that's going to take, 18 months and going to be costing, 500 times more, you really need to have an idea of where you're going, because if you don't, any path will take you there. So
that's right. If you don't know where you're going, you'll never get there. So let's swing this back to you're at MLB. You're there specifically for network automation initiatives. You have a background, like you've done software development, right? So you have a natural predilection to being comfortable with the tooling and the process, but also really being steeped in networking technology. So you're a unicorn, right? And what did it look like for you as you got established at MLB? Did they Did they have a great process? Did you help contribute to it? What did those first couple of years look like for you there?
Yeah, it was awesome because it was a blank slate, to be honest. Like there was really no automation whatsoever. And the leadership there, which, was Truman Boys at the time, and another gentleman I worked for at a startup, Seth Wayne, who runs MLS. They basically said to me, we don't really know what you do or how that works, but we know the outcomes that we want. So here's our broad outcomes that we want. Go make that happen. But it's just going to be you for a while. Right. And understand that you'll be working with a networking team that has had no exposure to automation whatsoever. So, the first few years were, going through kind of the cultural tooling, engagement process of, show them a little bit, see what they think, to go, kind of rinse, lather, and repeat, get ideas from their operational processes, figure out what made sense, what didn't make sense, see what kind of products that we were buying at the time versus trying to reinvent everything. There was a lot of that kind of in-house discovery that we went through. And I think at the end of like basically 3 years, we got to the point where we were really, really in good shape in the sense that people were like, yeah, automation, yay. Right. If you give us automation tools, we'll use them. Awesome. Right. We weren't at the point that like they wanted to build automation technology. That wasn't the goal. The goal is never to try to say, you're a great network engineer. Now you need to be a great software engineer. I think that's a little ridiculous, in a lot of cases, not all cases, but in a lot of cases, you gotta work with the team, their strengths and their areas where they want to improve, not like try to pretend that everybody's going to be a software engineer one day and start with that back, that kind of context. That just doesn't make sense to me. So,
right.
The first few years were really good. We learned a lot of things that worked, a lot of things that didn't work, a lot of products we tried out that were too early that I won't talk about, from vendors, but we got through it,
Sure.
and that was a really good experience. So that was the first few years of it. The one project that really kind of set the tone, though, that I look back and kind of laugh and I'm amazed about was I walk in basically the first week and they're like, we're going to build a chat bot for the network, and I'm like, that seems pretty silly, and but that's what they wanted. But then again, it reminded me of the whole Puppet thing. The goal wasn't, let's build a tool that will make network engineering's job better. It was, we've got broadcast engineering and ballpark engineering and, all these different technology teams that need to get information out of or do something with the network. And we wanted to do that through Slack, right? Because that was kind of, that's kind of our workflow model. And that project has evolved from what Slack allowed us to do at the time in like circa 2019 to, some incredible things that we're doing with AI technology now. So.
Sure. So let's get to that in a minute, right? So there's a little preamble to the AI conversation. And let me go back to 2022 and 2023, where like you I want to give you the credit due in terms of being a motivator for formation of Network Automation Forum. You've been out there in the community at all sorts of different forums where you've been really good about sharing what you've been experiencing at whatever organization you're a part of. Just happens to be MLB in this context, which I think is super useful. And I think your encouragement to say, yeah, we really need something that's very network automation focused, help push us over the edge. So I would take my hat off, but my hair is a mess. So it's virtual hat tip to you. And just like, I want to thank you for that. Like that was like, this is a real wise voice in this arena. We should probably pay attention to this. There were others too. Like I'm not putting it all on the shoulders of Jeremy Schulman, but thank you for the nudges on that. And, so at the time, ChatGPT, got pushed out into the wild, whether it was ready or not. what it was capable of or not. And that first AutoCon, AutoCon 0 in November 2023, I was kind of hoping, we'd see more about what's going on with AI for network automation. And there wasn't a whole heck of a lot. And in hindsight, we understand why, right? Now, I want you to take that, in some of our prep for this conversation, you kind of, you had some high points on what was useful, but what wasn't really there yet. How did this take you up to the current project that you're working on? And what did you say, aha, this is ready for me to actually do something with this chatbot for the network?
Yeah. Well, so first going back to the origins of NAF. I mean, while I nudged you and I know others did as well. I mean, really big kudos to you and Chris for doing it. It's one thing to talk the talk, but you guys walked the walk and you made it happen, which is an enormous amount of effort. Like, I don't know if people really truly appreciate what goes into putting on an event, the scale and magnitude of even a 500 person event, just the massive amount of time and effort going into, coordinating the event and the vendors and the speakers and, all of it to make the magic happen when people walk in the door and have an experience. I mean, you guys are doing a great job. You're killing it. Please continue to kill it. I'm always here to help with that, in any way that I can. So
we appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're making my dreams come true by actually doing the thing, whereas I'll just sit around in my comfy chair drinking scotch and going, it'd be really cool is if we had a forum, automation forum for ourselves, maybe I should talk to somebody about that. It's like, it was great. You guys did it. So thank you for that. And Chris, obviously, as well. And everybody, all the people that make it happen, there's a lot of people behind the scenes, you and I both know. So it's great. Looking at 2022, 23 timeframe for AI technology, I was looking at it and seeing, again, what could I do with the we'll call it the commercial products at the time, or even open source projects at the time, as a practitioner or as a person who's delivering product, right? I look at the role of my team is to build product that is used internally, right?
Sure.
We don't build fan-facing product. We don't make video games. We build, infrastructure systems. And really in circa 2022, 23, the technology from a we'll call it a software practitioner. I mean, honestly, the AI tooling at the end of the day is just software. Like, there's just, right. I need to build a product. Do I want to build it with some AI tech or not some AI tech? Do I want to write regular expressions and hate myself, or do I want to get an LLM to do that for me and I never have to write a regular expression ever again? And
it's a badge of honor, Regex.
Like circa 2022, I was writing, regular expressions to find IPv6 and IPv4. And now I never have to do that ever again. I'm like, here's some stuff. There's some IPv4 in here. Please find it for me and give me those values. It's like, it's literally like that now. So, that's a key shift, right? Between where we were a couple of years ago, which was, introducing people to the idea of a chat GPT kind of thing. And then people going bonkers with, it's going to put everybody out of jobs and it's going to build configurations and it's going to automate our network and whatever, all the things that, the priest of the high button wants to sell you, as my friend Derek Winkworth would say. And so, it's, there's the hype cycle. We all know the hype cycle. So, that was like super hype. But in the last year, I think really in the last 12 months, we've really seen a lot of technology enter into the hands of practitioners, software developers, product people, and even non-developers to produce, some level of, consumable internal product, right?
Yep.
I wouldn't call it commercial product, I wouldn't go that far, but for the likes of what we do, there's a lot of technology that allows us to go from aha to cha-ching in, weeks rather than months, which is quite incredible. And even in the last 2 weeks, I've started to experience some new technology that is just kind of blowing my mind. It's just like, I can't believe what I have now available to me as a person who's trying to deliver product. It's remarkable. It's just remarkable.
Let me tell you a bit more about Meter, the sponsor for this episode of Total Network Operations. Businesses are frustrated with legacy providers' inflexible pricing, IT resource and staffing constraints, complex deployments, and fragmented tools. Meter's single integrated networking stack is reimagining what it means for businesses to get and stay online. Meter's full stack solution is designed to give you deep control and visibility, and it covers everything from first site survey to ongoing support, giving you a single partner for all your connectivity needs. They're really taking a holistic approach to delivering fast, secure, and scalable connectivity without the complexity of managing multiple providers or tools. I've seen it up close and I've had a chance to try it out, and you can check it out for yourself. Go to meter.com/teenops and book a demo now. That's meter.com/TNOPS to book a demo. I highly recommend it. I think you'll be really impressed. Thanks to Meter for sponsoring this episode, and now back to the show. So I don't know how much detail you can go into, but I think the advent of MCP is pretty important to what you're doing. Like, maybe you should talk about that impact in particular.
Yeah. So what's great about MCP, and for those that are just, starting to learn the terminology and these widgets and technology pieces of AI, is we're all familiar with a REST API, right? Those of us who have to do network automation or automation in general, we know what a REST API is. And by and large, you're artisanally handcrafting code that, gets stuff and posts stuff and all that. But, you as a software engineer, you have to understand and comprehend what that API is. You need to understand and comprehend the inputs and the outputs. And you spend a lot of time, articulating an API, right? What MCP does, MCP at the end of the day is just another transport mechanism. It's just another payload mechanism, right? It has JSON RPC under the hood, right? But what makes it interesting and unique, or different, I should say, is two things. One, it allows the client to discover the set of tools that the server offers. So, for example, let's say we're using Netbox. I think Netbox is a technology that or product that a lot of people know.
Yep.
And probably a lot of people have written a lot of automation against Netbox APIs. But imagine there was an MCP server, as part of your Netbox product, and you could say connect that MCP server into an LLM agent. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but just imagine you could just kind of plug that into an AI agent, and the AI agent basically, when it fires up, it says, "Hey, what do you got?" And it basically downloads the list of tools and how to use them. Which this is the really cool part, so that you can say to the AI agent, you can say, "Hey, give me a list of all the circuits that I have for provider foo," right? And you can say that in English. Right. What the LLM is doing is it's taking that English, it's looking at the tools, it's saying, "Oh, I see I've got a tool like, get circuit, when parameters allow me to provide provider," and it kind of formulates the actual payload in for the MCP, not for the rest, but for the MCP tool, and then invokes that and gets the response back as JSON. So I don't want people to come away thinking that MCP is just a one-to-one universal translator to REST. It's not, and nor should it be, right? Right. You could have a product like Netbox that has, 100 API REST endpoints. And maybe you only want to have like 7 really good MCP endpoints that really kind of allow you to compose thoughtful workflows. That's really what you want to do. And once you have that, you can then start building these agents that you can just kind of bolt in MCP into, and then have conversational or chat or AI based processing. And where this becomes really interesting is not just in the explosion of MCP servers that are just broadly out there, and there are many, but where this is really impactful to the networking automation community is that there aren't that many for network automation, right? Which means that if you want to automate the network and you want to adopt AI technology, it means that you're going to have to roll your own MCP server around whatever product that you happen to be using, unless you can drive your vendors to offer MCP as an interface. And in some cases, there are vendors stepping up to that plate. Like we know of, like Itential has done that. Like they've spoken publicly about it.
Yep.
So what this allows us to do, or allows somebody like myself to do, is for the vendors that support it, we can use it, no coding. For the systems that might be bespokely our own, like imagine I've got broadcast, equipment,
Right.
And I want to interface that into an AI system, I can roll an MCP server around it, plug it in, and we could be literally chatting with or manipulating, weird equipment, in an agentic way, which I mean is pretty crazy. I mean, it's pretty.
That doesn't have to have its own RESTful interfaces. Maybe it speaks TL1, like for optical gear.
Oh my God,
right?
dude. I mean, seriously, we're going to go there? Like, I wrote a TL1 parser when I was a co-op.
I think I remember talking about it. Yeah.
But I mean, you could do like crazy, stupid things like I have a product that only speaks SNMP and you want to put an MCP server in front of that, right? I mean, you're right. It doesn't have to be right. MCP will kind of, provide a unit. People like to make the comparison that it's like the USB interface of AI tech.
Yeah.
That kind of works. I don't like that analogy, but
I don't either.
But
yeah,
the analogy of it's plug and play, I do get. Like I think that's what they're trying to get at, is like this is plug and play, and it'll, what, I don't know.
I would love your commentary on how rapidly MCP went from an idea to a standard pushed into the arena, to now you can actually work with vendors and service providers to say, well, why don't you give me this MCP front end to what you're doing, and compare that to how quickly stuff does or doesn't get through IETF. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Why so much faster for this new generation of AI tooling?
Yeah, I really have to credit John Capobianco. I've known John for a while, like back when he was doing Ansible, and I would talk to him about Ansible and all the things. And I love John to death. He's awesome. And he's like, "Hey, dude, have you seen MCP?" And I'm like, "No, what's that?" And he's like, "Dude, you have to do this." And I'm like, "All right." So, John got me into what is MCP, probably like January. Like I think he's probably talking to me about it like last year, but I wasn't really paying too much attention to it. But, I really started paying attention to AI because I had a project, kind of kick off in January of this year. And he just fired me up about it. And once I really kind of started to understand, what it was at the time, I'm like, okay, this is going to be kind of a big deal. It's still got some rough edges on it. There's some issues with here and there, but the broad adoption by the industry writ large was really, the showcase event. That was the Cambrian event for bolting together an LLM, which up until that point could only chat about the things that you chatted with it, to allowing an LLM to interact with the external environment in some, quote, standard way.
Right.
And once that happened, everybody started to like build an MCP server. It's like there's everybody has an MCP server to do something. And some vendors started to create, open source MCP servers that they would support. And some of them were just experimental, and some of them were just kind of crafty and fun. I mean, you had this whole spectrum of people experimenting with what can I do with an MCP server, and how can I connect that into my, LLM AI chatbot to do something crazy cool. And so, you have to kind of look at the event as not related to networking or IETF or any of the standards industries that we look at. It was sort of like, there's this wild west of AI technology happening, and it's going to continue to happen. Like for who knows how many years it's going to be this wild west, but we're in it. We should enjoy it. Wear your cowboy hat, ride your horse, have some good times, sit around the campfire, sing. We're going to be doing this for a while. And, it's MCP right now. People are like, well, what happens when MCP goes away? I'm like, if that happens, we'll deal with it. It's like, but seems to be a really good thing right now. Everybody seems to like really enjoy it. So why don't you just kind of go with the flow instead of being a hater? So, it's fine.
One of the issues there, like what's going to happen when MCP goes away, I would say stuff doesn't really ever go away. Other things get layered on, and we're looking at the next new shiny object, squirrel. And I I think we need to like, okay, we're building a toolkit, and we have multiple capabilities. And how many of us have heard about the next thing from John? Like John Capobianco he's slashing his way through the jungle, right? Showing people what's possible. It doesn't mean everyone's going to use everything that he puts visibility on. And that's not just a John Capobianco thing. That's anyone. But if 10% of what he's doing becomes useful to me, that's the 10% I didn't have before I heard him talk about it. So
yeah, I mean, more so than anything, John is a master of the art of the possible. Right. He'll show you this is possible, whether it's useful to you or not. It may give you an idea of, and this is what John's done for me like 100 times. He'll show me something and I'm like, yeah, that's really cool. But what if we did X, Y, and Z, and we'll kind of ping pong that idea around, and then we'll come to something that I could use like in something that I'm doing, for work, and like really benefit. Like, we'll talk through like, well, how are you dealing with this problem? Well, I've tried this and I've tried that and I've tried this, tried that, and none of these things work. And then we'll kind of futz with it for a while. And then this worked, and like, I mean, that's kind of where we are in the kitchen soup of AI, and network and just broader automation, not network automation, but broader automation. So I think that, understanding what is possible is a huge component to bridge the chasm of, where we are to where we want to be, because it's the people like John, and I did this when I was at Juniper, to show the art of the possible, because if you don't have somebody showing it, you just don't think about doing something any other way than you've always been doing it. Right.
Well, one of the comments you made as we prepped for this conversation was, I don't know if I can quote you on this directly, but the way I captured it in my notes was, when it comes to AI projects, most people don't know what expectations they should have because they really don't understand the capabilities, right? And having someone to show art of the possible and demonstrate capabilities can help lead to rationalization of like, okay, now I know what I can expect out of this project. What helps people get past this? What helped you get past it? Since you first heard the acronym MCP in January 2025 or whenever it was, probably late last year.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it is really spending the time, rolling up your sleeves and working with the technology to figure a lot of things out. Like, we're still at that. I think we're still at that stage of the technology curve, right? There is no really good O'Reilly cookbook. Do you remember back in the day? I lived.
Look behind me.
Yeah,
there's some here. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I had a whole I couldn't do my job if I didn't have an O'Reilly cookbook, right? It's
exactly.
And it's funny because every time I talk to a vendor and they offer some framework or toolkit or SDK that's sufficiently complicated, they're like, here's my API. Isn't it pretty? I've got 100 endpoints. I'm like, give me a cookbook. Like it's so complicated. I need a cookbook. If you don't give me a cookbook, I'm going to be spending like 2 weeks just figuring out how to use, all this stuff. So, I would say it's just rolling up your sleeves and working with it, understanding, where the technology is today to try to meet some of the things that you're doing. For example, when I first started working with MCP, there was no concept of security. There was no concept of limiting the access of the client to specific tools. Like, for example, let's go back to our Netbox example. If you're a user, just, logged into Netbox and you're a user, you have privileges. You can see things. You might be able to write certain things. You can't write other things, like role-based access control. The whole concept of not only security, are you authorized to use this MCP server, but the whole concept of fine-grained role-based access control, none of that existed like back in January. Now that exists, right? Now that exists. So if you want to build an MCP server and have, OAuth flow and security with, that kind of stuff, and also have fine-grained scopes that say this client can do read things and this other client can do read and write things, or, whatever scopes you decide to define for your app. Like that's now possible. And that only happened recently. Like it happened so recently that commercial tools out there don't even support that integration yet. Like, which I find very annoying. But that's how fast we're moving. That's how fast we're moving.
And that's why you don't have the cookbooks, right? Because things are moving so fast. You've got to go see what other people are doing from a project perspective, check, the relevant Git repos and so forth. I think this, so one of my pet peeves is, security is step 79 in the product management lifecycle, right? Step number 1 is get it to work, make it pass packets if it's the networking product. Step number 2 is find a way to manage it. And then step 79 is secure it, obviously with lots of steps in between. And the rapidity with which we've seen role-based access control, SSL support, and things now coming, within less than a year of things coming to market, that's just another strong strength of the development environment and the ideation that can happen so quickly now. I think it's pretty incredible. I don't think we've seen anything like it this quickly ever in our careers.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to compare it to the evolution of REST. When REST was first introduced, which how many people can say when they saw that happen, right? It's like kids today. So, anyways, but when you're used to working with a REST API that does have security, that does have scope usage and things of that nature, you just inherently believe that any interface that performs a similar function should have that capability. And MCP, did get there, right? Were they there at version 1? No, because they had no idea of if this idea was even good. Like they're like, hey, we're going to do this thing. Anthropic had this really great idea. It was self-serving because they wanted to, bolt things into their Claude desktop and their other tools. And everybody was just like, this is awesome. Let's make this great. And everything sticks around until it doesn't. But, when they made Ethernet, did you think Ethernet would still be around? I mean, here we are today with something we call Ethernet. So,
that's right.
Right. I think that it was really when the big companies picked it up and more or less effectively standardized on it, it's going to be a thing, right? When Microsoft, has connectivity for MCP into their stuff and Google and, AWS and everybody's supporting it, as a way to build sophisticated agents and build, end client technology like Claude Desktop and things like it. I mean, it just becomes a de facto standard, right?
You referenced earlier in the current project that you're working on, how you've been able to get to basically no code. And I want to make sure it's clear, you're a coder, right? You don't have an aversion to writing code. You aren't necessarily trying to get away from writing code. Yet, in the span of the last 6 to 9 months, you've been able to do some really incredible reporting, without writing any code. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, without divulging too much, I'm working with a vendor who happens to offer an MCP server, and that MCP server allows me to query information using natural language, right? So in that product, I can set up a series of natural language phrases. I go into that product, I point and click, and I say, make a phrase that lets me pull some data out and retrieves that data. And their MCP server basically offers a set of tools, one of which is hey, execute, first, here's the set of phrases I know. And then here's another tool that says, go ahead and execute a phrase that I know. And I basically plugged that into a tool that, an AI chat tool that allows you to bolt in MCP servers. And I basically asked it a fairly complicated question, can you please triage the status of the circuit? and the AI, the tool, the AI that I was using figured out from the list of phrases that I have preset up, again, not writing a single line of code, figured out, and I have no idea how this works. Yeah, I mean, this is PFM to me. like figured out the series of phrases that it needed to ask to get to the answer to triage something, and produced a comprehensive markdown report, like with charts and summaries and next steps. I mean, it blew my mind. And that was a case where I didn't write a single line of code to get an outcome that a network operator would want, right?
Yep.
The closer we get to that end user experience, that we have the ability to buy products with MCP servers from our vendors that allow that kind of zero programming user experience in commercial products that allow you to bolt them in MCP servers into it, affords people to go from aha to ching without writing a line of code. Now, are we there yet? No. Are we getting there? Slowly. It takes people with a baseball bat to hammer vendors to even do this thing. They're like, what's MCP? Why should I do that? I've had that conversation many times.
Sure.
And I think showcasing these examples that I'm talking about in a public way, which I hope to do, will get other vendors to go, oh, I get that.
Exactly.
This is insane. I know that Peter Sprigato over at Itento gets it because they're doing it. Right. He gets it. So I hope other, vendors holistically across the networking industry really kind of take note.
For sure. Duly noted. And I will look forward to whatever public venues you can get this out when you're ready for prime time, for sure.
Yeah.
I also want to pull back to, what does it take to move this forward? People rolling up their sleeves, playing with this. You work with the NetOps and SecOps teams in your organization. How are you able to encourage them, empower them to just go play with this themselves? Do they just wait for you to create tools and hand them off? Or are you able to find the people embedded who are also fearless enough to at least go try it for themselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm really fortunate to work with some really great people in those teams. So in each of those teams, there are now, individuals with programming skill sets and domain expertise. Right. I'll work, for example, with a gentleman who is all about, firewalls. Understands the domain of firewalls intimately. Yep. And also has the ability to, write Python to interface with, REST APIs. That's kind of the state of the art. Yep. What I bring to the table is I show them how to take that to the next step, take that and build an MCP server so that, you can then not have to write bespoke workflow, orchestration. You just plug it into something and off you go. So it's really great to collaborate with kind of this I kind of think of them as my extended staff, right? Sure. It's these are subject matter experts with some some programming skill set. They don't think of themselves as software engineers. Their job is not software engineers. They're just simply trying to build better tools for themselves to use. And I'm helping them, adapt and adopt AI technologies to get them there so that it lowers the aha cha-ching experience for them and then their coworkers who would then use those tools.
I think that's a super important realization. I can swing a hammer and I can use a saw, but I'm not a carpenter. Right. But I'm using tools to get things done around my house, right, that need to get done. Right. And you can still be a network engineer, but understand a REST API, use Python, play around with MCP, right? And still be that firewall SME, that network SME. You're just accruing more tools and more ways to do your job better and kind of match, find the differential, variable speed transmission and how to keep ramping up the business and your career.
Yeah. But I would, I would like to temper the expectation here. It's doing this stuff, writing an MCP server and doing this stuff. I mean, there are good libraries out there to make this happen. There are a ton of videos that show you how to do this, because this is not just for networking. So you get the benefit, you get the force multiplier of an entire industry, but you're still writing code. If you're a network engineer and you're writing Python code to build automation some sophisticated automation tools, here's what I would tell you. Spend some time learning MCP and the tool ecosystem around it. And the benefit of that will be you will write overall less code, right? Meaning what you'll start to learn how to do is leverage AI LLM technology and bolt that in with MCP to do the business logic. This is where the whole LLM and quote unquote, prompt engineering comes into play, right? So if I said, well, I've got an MCP server for, let's say, a service provider, right? So then I can open up a ticket or get status about my ticket, or is there a maintenance event? And then I had an MCP server that connected to, say, Netbox. And then I had another MCP server that connected to, say, my network observability platform. I could put that into an AI chat system, and without writing a line of code, I can say, "Hey, tell me what the status of the circuit at the burp place is, and is there any maintenance going on there? And the AI will figure out which tools to call to figure that out. And they, oh yeah, there's a maintenance going on there. Oh, okay, well then I should tell my network management system to stop allowing alerts for And I'm talking about that as a human going burp, 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 burp. But the reality is it doesn't have to be a human driving, the actual agent system. What we have today and what I just described is what people will refer to as a co-pilot, right? I am the human. I am driving the bus. I've got this co-pilot AI. It's imbued with tools, but I'm driving the bus, right? That's where we're at today. Where we're going is we're going from co-pilots to co-workers.
Right.
Co-workers is a completely autonomous idea, meaning I'm going to give my agent enough instructions to be able to autonomously handle some, not all, some roles and responsibilities of a human counterpart and engage in a way that is consistent with how humans interact with each other, meaning if humans interact through Jira, this system interacts through Jira. If humans interact through, 10 different, tools that a business uses, the agent will do the same. It's just Bob. Bob just happens to be, working 24/7, doesn't need a break. It isn't, again, a means by which we're going to, quote, replace people. I want to make that really clear. I made this clear 10 years ago when people said automation is going to take our jobs. I think I would like to believe that people are like, oh no, it's not going to take our jobs. We're just going to have a different job doing the automation stuff, and it's actually more fun. At least I think it is. But the same thing is going to be true with this whole concept of digital coworkers. I mean, if you're understaffed and you're always complaining, I don't have enough people, I'm working too many hours, I'm dealing with toil, right? I have to deal with this BS service provider and 1,000 emails every day. And let's say you just didn't have to do that anymore, but you still worked on other engineering problems. Wouldn't that be nice? I think so. Yeah.
If you could have it wait on hold for you with Delta to make sure you're on the upgrade list, right? I don't want to do that. There's not stuff I want to waste my time doing.
Exactly.
So digital co-pilot to digital co-worker, that's a little view of, what's maybe right around the corner. What else does Jeremy's crystal ball show us? What's the next 6 months look like? 12 months. I know 18 months is forever.
There's what I am super fortunate to work, where I work and work with the people that I work with and the leadership that I have. I'm not just saying that, it is just a blessing where I work. It's just awesome, right? It's just, I get to work with some, not just the people, but some companies that I work with, the partners that we have. It's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. So when I say these are the things that I'm looking at, I believe there are other people doing, in other companies doing similar things,
Sure.
Do I think, network engineers are doing kind of these things? Probably not yet. Will they be again, in a few years when the technology gets to be more consumable and the products become more frictionless, I think we'll see a lot of that. But my North Star, for everything that I'm doing kind of falls into a couple of different points. One is, how can we reduce friction, right? One of the things that there is friction is if I go back to this chatbot, project, It's like somebody is in Slack chatting away, banging on a keyboard and typing things, and then we kind of enhance that to have drop downs and buttons so they didn't have to type as much, right? Well, what if you could just talk to it conversationally? Let's just say, rather than typing, all these things and click buttons and do that, just like you'd ask Bob, hey, what's the status of XYZ, or was there an issue, yesterday at 2:00, at location foo, and do it conversationally. I think that's going to become, a surface of interaction, not exclusively, but, it's going to be a new surface of interaction. We're starting to see that. I mean, in our daily lives, we have, I'm not going to say the G word because my phone will wake up, but, hey, Siri, or, hey, live agent technology. I think people are accustomed to that now, and they're used to it now, and they're getting to the point of expectation. It's like we go back to expectations. If somebody has an expectation that I can, order a pizza by talking to my phone, why can't I get simple information about my network or IT systems writ large, just by talking to it? And so then if you take that idea and you couple that into, the idea of a digital coworker, and you say, well, if I can talk to an agent, why not talk to an agent in a Zoom meeting or, Google Meet meeting, or, pick your favorite Teams or what, like if I have a digital coworker, why can't they just hang out with us in a meeting so that, maybe, broadcast engineering team or some other team is like, they're having a meeting and they're like, gosh, we should ask the networking team some question. Well, now they don't have to like bring them into the meeting at all. They just, add the digital coworker, who's always on, who's always available, who's never in another meeting, who's never busy. I think that is a world that a lot of people want to live in, not just networking, and I'm not the only one, gabbing about this idea. You can go out there on the blogosphere and you'll find a whole bunch of people talking about this idea of, they might not call it digital coworkers like I'm calling it digital coworkers. Maybe some do, but the concept, they'll talk about agentic systems. They'll talk about, autonomous agentic system. I like the term digital coworker. It fits my brain. So
no, it works.
I think that's kind of, the other thing that, I think is really hard to do though, in the context of digital coworkers, is building durable systems. It's one thing to run a script and debug it, whatever. It's another thing to build an autonomous system, right? Meaning it's like your car. Like, like if you're driving your car, you got so many little autonomous systems, checking things all the time, making sure things are working, like you don't think about it. You're just, driving your car, right? A fully autonomous, durable system is exceptionally hard to build. Like when I was a real live software engineer back in, my post-college days, and I built real-time embedded durable systems. Like, I fortunately have that kind of background from my engineering days. But this is hard stuff. Like, this is why, these are the kinds of things you want to buy from a technology company. Like some of the products that I'm now seeing coming out from technology companies that are these kind of durable agents that they charge a lot of money for, by the way, but they bring a ton of value also. Right. I hope to see more of that technology being brought forward in the networking industry. Now, will that happen? Will all my dreams come true? A boy can dream, but we'll see. But I get to build the ones internally, for what we're doing, and it's just an amazing time to kind of marry IT and networking and AI and automation together. It's so amazing.
As an aside, I think you have one of multiple advantages in dealing with vendors and tech suppliers, having been on the other side of the aisle. And so you know what it looks like to receive these requests from customers. How has that helped you tune what you ask for and how you ask for it, baseball bat or no baseball bat?
Yeah, 100%. Like it's funny because when I, open the kimono on that fact with the vendors that I work with, it's like, we're best buddies. Like they're like, we speak the same language. We can get stuff done much faster. I know that when they're asking something of me, like what exactly they mean. and
Right.
we reduce the whole friction between, the ask and the give, right?
Right.
So it's been a real joy having that experience. And I think if you ask the people that I work with on the other side of the table, they would say, it's great to work with somebody who has that experience because they know what we need. They know, as an account team who
Right.
has a quota, what it
Yep.
is that when they say, "Hey, Mr. Customer, could you do this use case for us?" I'm like, do you want to have a published, are you looking for something you can publicly talk about because you want to, we can have those
Yeah.
conversations. It definitely, I think enriches, our partnership, engagement. Definitely. And that's something, it's funny because I was talking with some colleagues that they would say, I've been on the customer side, I've been on the vendor side, and I kind of bounce back and forth. And I think there's a lot of value to that exchange. Like if you've
Yep.
been a customer your whole life and you still have, lifespan in your career, do a vendor. Even if you only spend 3 years, and that might seem like a long time to you, but I mean, it will really give you the I'm walking in their shoes kind of empathy.
Yep.
And empathy goes a long way,
Yep.
to having really good partnerships. Yeah.
I agree. I mean, it's really given me a whole other view, having been on the customer side first and then the vendor side for 20 plus years, and now being back in a very strange space that I'm not sure I can describe anymore, but that's okay. How would you turn that into advice to, you know, your NetOps engineer who hasn't been on the vendor side, but really needs to communicate effectively? Like you've got a couple good, truth bombs that you would want to say, hey, here's how you need to talk to your SE. Here's how you need to talk to your account manager.
Yeah. That's a good question. And one worth really exploring. I think that's like a BOF table session at
Sure.
NAF, to be honest. But what I try to do, going back to the discipline process discussion we had earlier, is I'm trying to train, the NetOps people and the net engineering people and all the people I work with, not just networking,
Right.
To think through the persona, use case, behaviorism kind of what you're trying to do in your job, as they
Right.
write that down, because that's the same thing that a vendor is going to say, well, what are you trying to do with our product? What are your use cases? They always love that. They always come to you and say, well, tell me, what are your top five use cases? And a network operations person might go, I really don't know what my top five use cases are. I mean, we do so much, we're so busy. Right. So, being prepared, writing down your processes, as an act of business.
Right.
And version controlling that, by the way. Don't make it a wiki page.
Right.
Please don't make it a wiki page that never is version controlled. Like, do it as a
markdown
file. Here's an idea. Do it as a markdown file. Check it into Git. These documents that, I mean, you can use Google Docs or MS Word, and they've got their own versioning stuff. But do that, please. Version control. That definitely helps. A vendor engagement so that you can have a constructive conversation with them about, these are the things that I do. This is where your product could add value if you would do these things either at all or reduce the friction in the process that I'm trying to do. So if you went to your firewall vendor, for example, or your network vendor or whatever, and you're like, this is the process that I have to follow to upgrade, a switch or a box, and it takes me 2 hours, and could you make this part of the process better? That's helpful to them, because the account team probably doesn't really live and breathe the product as much as an operator lives and breathes the product.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, look, we could go on for a lot longer. We'll do this again. I can't let you go without the one fun question. If you're willing to say, you do this long enough, like you've caused outages, right? What's the worst outage you've ever caused that you're willing to come clean on? Or if you can't say that you caused it, the one that it was most interesting to you.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people assume that I've been a network engineer, but I've never been a network engineer. I've never been a network operator. I mean, I've spent 20 years plus in vendor land, building and selling.
Yep.
And, my current role is the first time I've ever been, on the customer side. And I don't think I've ever done something destructive. I don't think the automation systems that we built, I'm going to say this out loud, and then tomorrow, like, something's going to go down terribly.
I'm not trying to curse you. I'm sorry.
Yeah. But one of the best things that Seth Lane, who was my boss at the time, said to me, that there's no such thing as automation emergencies. And I live by that. I try to build my software so that there are no automation emergencies. Now, again, this goes into building very durable systems and a lot of testing and, yakety schmackety. But, can somebody, shoot themselves in the foot very quickly with a software script? Yes, they can. Yes, at 100%. You can really do something terrible. Like, I would say this, though, just to answer your question, because I think it's a good question. I would say this, more often than not, network outages or I wouldn't say outages, but bad things have happened as a result of not using the automation tools and products that we have in place, right? And this is to me, this is kind of a big struggle, as a builder and a provider of product, even product from other vendors, right? Sometimes people just don't use them. Like they fall back to this is the CLI, and this is my cold dead hand, and this is my spreadsheet where I'm going to copy and paste columns and copy and paste fields like the old way. The people will fall back into their old way of doing things and make mistakes that, had they used tools that are provided for them, they wouldn't have caused, some minor disruptions or whatnot.
That's a perfect way to reappropriate the question. Nice turn of the tables. Very well played. Look, we're going to wrap this up. Is there any place you want to point people to, stuff that you're putting out there in public for review, sharing? Do you blog anywhere?
So, the best place to keep tabs on me is really my LinkedIn profile, which I'm not very active on. But when I do an event like NAF, or I was at Google Next not too long ago, I'll share the links to the videos when they come out and such. I don't blog as much, these days. There's so much good content out there. There's so many people, doing great things like Capobianco and many, many, like Phil Gervasi, and so many people that have really stepped up and great content providers that they're doing such a great job. What more could I really say, except for things that I want to say live and in person. So you have to come see the Jeremy Show.
That's okay. Well, let's all go see the Jeremy Show. We'll see where you show up next. Really, really appreciate you being here today, and for just the connection that we've had for, like you said, almost 20 years now. Let's keep it going for at least another 20, hopefully a lot longer for both of us. So
absolutely.
And for all you operators listening in, thanks for tuning in to Total Network Operations. We'd love your feedback. If you've got something to say about NetOps, you want to hear what's coming, you want to recommend people for the show, contact me via LinkedIn. Just drop me a DM, or you can send us a follow-up message at packetpushers.net/follow-up. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time on Total Network Operations.